I thought I married the wrong woman, until I finally came home early. Chapter 1. The Mask I Wore to Work. I used to believe I had life figured out. Good job, beautiful wife, a son who smiled when he saw me, even if only for those few minutes before bedtime. But somewhere along the way something started to rot inside me. Sarah and I met in a church after I moved to a new city for work. She was radiant, calm, grounded, and kind in a way I hadn't known existed. We shared the same values then, or at least I thought we did. Marriage came naturally. She stayed home while I worked. It was what we were both raised to expect. After our son was born, things should have gotten better. I had just landed a big promotion. The kind of role my parents would brag about at reunions. But as the job grew bigger, so did the distance between me and the life I had at home. I started resenting her. I know how ugly that sounds. She was always smiling, always with our boy in her arms, laughing, singing, just glowing. Meanwhile, I came home burned out. I envied her. I hated myself for it. We'd agreed she'd stay home. We'd planned it. And still, I felt this growing divide between us, as if I had become someone who needed more and she hadn't noticed. I started sleeping with my back to her, dreading the sound of her soft voice in the morning, avoiding eye contact at breakfast. The worst part? She had no idea. And one night, after a 14-hour workday, I stood outside our front door and realized I didn't want to walk in. I didn't want to pretend anymore. But when I did, something happened that I'll never forget. Chapter 2. What I Saw in the Quiet. The door creaked open and the familiar scent of home hit me, soft lavender and something baking. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that told me bedtime had already passed. For once, I was home before the lights were all out. I set my briefcase down and stepped into the living room. And that's when I saw her. Sarah sat cross-legged on the floor, our son asleep in her lap. The TV was off. Her hair was a mess and her sweatshirt had some kind of stain down the front. There were toys scattered everywhere, an open bottle of milk forgotten on the couch, and a damp towel tossed on a chair. She hadn't heard me come in. She just sat there, gently rocking our son, eyes half closed. She looked exhausted, truly exhausted, in a way I'd never seen before. Not that I'd ever really paid attention. And suddenly all the thoughts I'd been nursing, about how easy her life was, how much harder mine was, started to feel paper thin. I backed into the hallway trying to make sense of it. That's when I noticed the to-do list on the fridge. 9 a.m. laundry, 10 a.m. pediatrician call, 11 a.m. vacuum upstairs, nap time, dinner, clean bathroom, bath time, fold clothes, prep Sunday school. Every line had a check mark next to it. I stood there, feeling like a stranger in my own life. For the first time in years, I realized I didn't know what her days looked like. I'd been so wrapped up in mine, I never bothered to ask. Just then, Sarah stirred and looked up. She smiled at me, tired and tender. "Hey, you're home early," she whispered. "Everything okay?" I opened my mouth to answer. But I couldn't speak, because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't sure how to explain what I was feeling. Chapter 3. A Mirror I Never Meant to Hold. I mumbled something about work being slow, though my voice barely carried the weight of that lie. Sarah just nodded and gently carried our son to his crib while I stood there, suddenly feeling more like a guest than a husband. The kitchen light was on, casting a yellow glow across the counters. There were 2 plates of dinner waiting, still warm from being covered in foil. She had made pot roast, my favorite, with roasted carrots and garlic mashed potatoes. She always remembered what I liked, even when I stopped noticing the little things she did. We sat at the table and ate in silence. For the first time in years, I noticed the soft lines on her face that hadn't been there before. Not from aging, but from living. From giving. From holding our home together. She asked me about my day like she always did. I told her the usual. Meetings, calls, numbers. Nothing that mattered. But she listened, really listened, as if every word was important. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd asked her the same. "Do you ever get lonely?" I asked out of nowhere. She blinked. "Sometimes," she said. "But I keep busy." She said it so simply. No bitterness, no accusation. Just truth. And that hurt more than any angry outburst ever could. Later that night, as we got into bed, I stared at the ceiling in the dark. My chest felt tight. Not from anger, not from stress, but shame. I had spent months resenting her for not being what I needed. But maybe I never once stopped to ask what she needed. And that realization, it didn't just haunt me. It cracked something wide open. Chapter 4. The Night I Broke Down. The next morning, I left for work later than usual. I lingered in the kitchen, sipping coffee while Sarah packed our son's bag for his church daycare. She hummed softly while doing it, nothing special, just a tune she probably didn't even realize she was singing. It was comforting, familiar. And suddenly, it felt like I had wasted years being blind to it. At work I couldn't focus. Every spreadsheet blurred into the next. My assistant had started taking on tasks I used to do, which left me with space, too much space to think. And all I could think about was how I'd become a man I swore I'd never be, distant, bitter, numb. By the time I got home that evening, Sarah had already put our son to bed. The house was spotless. A soft scent of lemon cleaner floated in the air. There were folded towels on the couch and a new photo frame on the shelf, our son's messy finger painting inside it. She greeted me with a kiss, warm and effortless. She had no idea how much I didn't deserve it. That night I poured myself a glass of scotch. Then another. I sat on the back porch, alone in the dark, staring at nothing. I drank until my vision blurred and my body felt too heavy for the chair. And that's when it happened. I stumbled into the bathroom, slammed the door behind me and fell to my knees over the toilet. Sarah found me there, slumped, shaking and covered in regret. The look in her eyes wasn't panic. It was concern. Real concern. She knelt beside me and held my head up, wiped my face with a towel and whispered, "I'm here." Through the blur of shame and alcohol, it all came pouring out. The resentment. The loneliness. The pressure. The guilt. How I felt like I was living with a stranger. How I hated myself for feeling that way. I cried, ugly, broken sobs. And she didn't flinch. She just wrapped her arms around me and held on. But what she said next changed everything. Chapter 5. The promise in her voice. She held me as if none of the awful things I'd just admitted changed how she saw me. I could barely look her in the eyes, but she cupped my face and made me. "I knew you were hurting," she said softly. "I just didn't know how deep it went. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. Because I didn't want to admit I was the one who changed. We sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours. I told her everything, how I had been raised to believe love meant roles and responsibilities. How I thought providing was all I needed to do. And how I envied her because I assumed her days were easier than mine, not realizing she was carrying a different kind of weight entirely. She listened. Not once did she defend herself or interrupt. When I finished, she leaned her forehead against mine and said something that stopped the storm in my chest. "I never needed you to be perfect. I just needed you to show up." Those words hit me harder than anything else ever had. I thought about all the ways I had chosen distance over presence, silence over vulnerability. And in that moment, I made a decision. We weren't going to let this marriage fade. The next morning, we signed up for couples counseling. Not because we were broken, but because we were still worth fighting for. That same week, I also registered us for a cooking class, something small, something light. Something that gave us a space to laugh again. I cut my hours at work. Spoke to my boss. Took a real stand for once, not for the company but for my family. We started finding each other again. Slowly, awkwardly at times, but genuinely. Conversations stretched longer. Smiles came easier. Our son laughed louder. And just when I thought things were settling, Sarah came to me one evening with something in her hand. Something I hadn't expected. And the moment I saw it, I knew our story wasn't done changing yet. Chapter 6. Coming Home for Real. Sarah handed me a small white envelope. No name, no note, just soft edges and a quiet weight. I opened it carefully, not sure what to expect. Inside was a printout of a family vacation itinerary. A full month off starting after Christmas. Flights. A cabin in the mountains. Time carved out just for the three of us. I looked up at her, confused. "I know we've both been giving everything to survive," she said, "but I want us to remember how to live. Together." I didn't know what to say. I just nodded, overwhelmed. The guilt still lingered, yes, but this time so did something else. Hope. Since that night on the bathroom floor, we had begun rebuilding. Not a marriage rooted in tradition, but a partnership rooted in truth. We laughed more. We fought better. We let go of who we thought we had to be and made space for who we were becoming. I stopped counting hours at work and started counting bedtime stories and shared dinners. Sarah? She started opening up about the things she missed, goals she shelved, hobbies she wanted to try. We planned around them. We made time. And one evening, I sat watching her braid our son's hair before bed, her hands moving gently as he giggled in her lap. That was the moment it hit me. I never married the wrong woman. I just had to finally come home. To see her for who she truly was. And now, I see her, fully, clearly, gratefully. And I'm never walking through that door the same way again.